Hello and welcome to the Gremlins garden. Today we'll be planting some seeds to get ready for our fall and winter harvest. Before we get started, I quickly wanted to make a note about organization. It's actually really important to be organized, not just in your garden, but in all of life. But in your garden especially, if you're a beginner, and even for people that are more seasoned at gardening, it's a good idea to stay organized so that you can look back at things without having to search through all of your seed packets, your seed collection, look back on websites. If you put all of your information in one place, such as a garden journal, then it's really easy to look it back up again if you can't remember it. So I went through my current seed collection and I picked out all of the ones that said specifically, whether on the packet or on the website, if I had to look on the internet, sometimes they don't have all of the information, but they said on the packet that they were good for growing and planting right now. So the ones that I didn't include within my collection are ones that are not for planting right now, such as I've got Bull's Blood, Crosby's Egyptian, Early Wonder, Flat of Egypt, Golden. I've got all these different kinds of beets. And then I had Chioggia beets, but those ones said specifically on the packet that they have poor quality if they're planted after July, and since we're in the first week of August, I decided not to plant that variety. The other varieties, however, those are good to go. Now, another note about the seed packet information, a lot of times it will tell you whether or not you need to pre-soak something, or if it has other needs in order to make it germinate, like if it has temperature requirements, or if it needs to be specifically wet on the surface and exposed to light. This should be on the back of the packet, and if it's not, it should be on the vendor's website, but quality vendors usually include this information in their packets. Most plants, it's best to buy them in the season that they were packed for. You can still use older seeds, they just have reduced rates of viability, so less of them will germinate. So if it says that the germination rate is 80%, but your seeds were packed for 2013, like these ones, your germination rate is actually going to be lower than that because the seeds have been sitting for longer. The nutrients that are stored inside of the seeds has had time to degrade, and so they just have less energy, and the weaker ones are way more likely to die or to not germinate at all. So, keeping that in mind, you can totally plant your older seeds. I would just recommend that you plant more than you think you need, and you either thin them out, transplant them, or just give away your extras later. There are a lot of different options for the type of container that you can begin your plants in. Some of them you have to purchase, some of them you can makeshift on your own at home, such as the egg carton or plastic containers that are food safe. If you do use a container like this, you want to nail some holes in the bottom so that you have drainage so that you're not waterlogging your plants. With the egg carton, however, the water will seep out freely, so you don't need to worry about that. Sometimes you can also go to garden centers and find that they have a container recycling area that you can find 4-packs and other small containers for seed starting in and get them for free. direct sow your seeds in the ground, or you can plant them in containers. I'm going to be starting most of my seeds in containers this year just because I'm in the process of moving. The advantages of doing this, if you're in the process of moving, is that you can buy yourself a little bit of time before your seeds go directly into the garden. So if you have some of your summer crops that are still doing really good and you want to get a few more harvests off of them, but that's where your fall crops are going to go, it gives them a little bit more time before you have to pull them up out of the ground and make space. Also, it gives you a chance to take into account the mature size of the seeds so that you don't have to do any thinning. It's close together, and then as they start to germinate, you either pull out and eat, destroy, or replant the ones that are too close together so that they won't crowd each other out. If you are transplanting thinnings, you do want to be really careful with their root systems and with the ones that are left in the ground when you're doing that. That I would recommend that you direct sow only, that you don't try to do transplants. They tend to have either forked or stunted roots when you transplant them, so that's why I would recommend always direct sowing them and not buying them already started, even if you can find them. It's rare that you'll find them already started in retail stores, but if you do, I still wouldn't recommend buying them. Favorable conditions, which is determined by their genetic code. So whether it be consistent moisture, changes in day length, temperature, or all of these, that's what it requires in order for the seed to germinate, and what prevents the seed from germinating when conditions are not favorable and when the plant will not be able to grow. Then tamp them down lightly and move them to an area that's not extremely hot. For example, where I'm working right now is essentially a heat sink. It's the gravel driveway. It gets really hot, hotter than the lawn does, and these cold winter crops might actually burn or even be forced to bolt, which is to flower early. Most of these I'm not trying to get to flower. I'm trying to eat a different part of it, so I don't want to encourage them to bolt, so that's why I'll be moving them to a less hot area. Find that the temperature of the soil and the temperature that the roots are at will influence how fast they grow. For this reason, you don't want to water your plants in with freezing cold water. Lukewarm water is better. You'll notice that as your plants grow, they become thirstier and thirstier, while they require fairly little water at first, mostly just to replace what's lost to evaporation. However, as they get larger, you'll notice that if they are allowed to dehydrate, they might actually burn. So you don't really want them to dehydrate, but you don't want to overwater them either. A good way to see if your plants need to be watered is to touch the soil, lift the container to see how heavy or light it is, and go from there. Sometimes plants can be dried out on the surface, but the soil at the bottom of the container has not yet dried, and so you don't need to water it yet. So just you can dig down, you can lift up the container and look in the bottom. There's a lot of different methods. For plants that are already growing, that are in containers, you can pull them out and see if the root ball has dried. For example, this one is wet, so it doesn't need to be watered right now. You want to avoid overwatering, not only because it makes it, like the plants need a little bit of air at their roots, and they could essentially drown. You'll notice that they can't uptake the nutrients that they would otherwise be able to if they're constantly waterlogged, and the plant might actually start to look yellow because it can't get the nitrogen from the soil because it is so wet. Also, if you overwater, you could start to see algae forming on the surface, which will take over nutrients that would otherwise go to your plant, and it creates habitat for the fungus gnat, which lays its eggs underneath the surface of the algae, and then its larvae hatch out and begin to eat the roots of your plant. Now you always want to write your plant tags in pencil. Pen and Sharpie are actually not permanent when they're exposed to weather, such as bright sunlight and constant rain. So trust me, you want to write them in pencil or you're going to be wondering what the heck you planted. Also, don't trust yourself to just remember. Don't tell yourself you'll be able to remember something without writing it down, because at the time it seems like you will, but you won't. So just write it down. Trust me. These that I started last week, just starting to come up. This here is not a pea and can get pulled out. They have a very distinctive look when they come up through the ground, so you can tell what's a weed and what's a pea very easily. Also, this is my example tag where I've written in both pencil and Sharpie, and you can see that the Sharpie is already starting to become dull. It's not quite as bright of a blue as it was when I first did it. That's it for now. Next time we'll do succession sowing, talk prepping mulches, and what perennials you can be planting for the fall. See you then on the Gremlins Garden.